Rain lashed against Kevin's cracked windshield as he stared at the $200 tip flashing on his delivery app. He only needed another $1,000 to keep his daughter's medical treatments from being suspended. But stepping into the penthouse of Chicago's most ruthless billionaire was a mistake that would change his life forever. Kevin Carter gripped the steering wheel of his 2009 Honda Civic, his knuckles white as the Chicago storm raged around him. The windshield wipers squeaked in a frantic, failing rhythm, barely clearing the torrential downpour. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. By all rights, he should have been home in his cramped one-bedroom apartment, checking the oxygen monitor strapped to his 5-year-old daughter Leora. Instead, he was idling outside Nobu, waiting for a massive order of sashimi. Leora's hospital bills had stacked up on the kitchen counter like a paper mountain he couldn't climb. Ever since his wife passed away 3 years ago, Kevin had fallen from a comfortable life as a mid-level architect to a desperate gig worker juggling 3 jobs. Dr. Harrison Gallagher at Chicago Medical Center had been incredibly patient, but the hospital's billing department was not. If Kevin didn't have $4,000 by Friday, Leora's experimental autoimmune treatments would be paused. A pause that could prove fatal. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. New order. Estimated earnings $23.40. Upfront tip $200. Kevin blinked, wiping the condensation from his phone screen to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. $200. It was a lifeline. He accepted the order instantly. The drop-off address was 11 East Walton Street, the Waldorf Astoria residences, the playground of the elite. By the time Kevin retrieved the 2 heavy insulated bags of high-end sushi, he was soaked to the bone. His cheap windbreaker clung to his shoulders, dripping water onto the pristine marble floors of the Waldorf's lobby. The concierge, a stiff-lipped man whose name tag read Gregory, eyed Kevin with undisguised disdain. "Delivery for V. Hayes," Kevin said, his teeth chattering slightly. "Penthouse?" Gregory's sneer faltered. A flash of genuine nervousness crossed the older man's face. "Ms. Hayes does not accept unsolicited deliveries. I will have to call up." "She ordered it through the app," Kevin replied, tapping his screen. Gregory picked up a sleek black phone, dialed a single digit, and murmured into the receiver. A moment later, his posture went completely rigid. "Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am." He hung up and pointed to a frosted glass elevator at the end of the hall. "Take the private car. It will open directly into her foyer. Do not linger. Ms. Hayes values her privacy." Kevin didn't care about Ms. Hayes's privacy. He cared about the $200 tip clearing his bank account. The elevator ride was silent and terrifyingly fast, rocketing up 60 floors in a matter of seconds. When the doors slid open with a soft chime, Kevin stepped out of the sterile steel box and into another world. The penthouse was a cavernous expanse of dark wood, brushed steel, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a dizzying view of the lightning-scarred Chicago skyline. The aesthetic was immaculate but cold. There were no photographs, no thrown blankets, no signs of actual human life. It looked like a rendering Kevin might have designed in his architectural days, perfect but hollow. "Leave it on the kitchen island." The voice sliced through the quiet hum of the central air conditioning. It was a woman's voice, crisp, authoritative, and entirely devoid of warmth. Kevin turned. Standing at the edge of the sunken living room was Victoria Hayes. Even if Kevin didn't read the Financial Times, he would have known she was powerful. Victoria Hayes was the 34-year-old CEO of Hayes Global, a commercial real estate empire. The tabloids called her the Ice Queen of the Gold Coast. She was dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back into a severe twist. She held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid ice, clinking gently as she observed him with piercing, calculating grey eyes. "Sure thing," Kevin said, keeping his tone neutral. He walked over to the massive black marble island and began carefully unzipping the insulated bags, setting the extravagant sushi platters on the counter. "I hope everything is here. Have a good night, Miss Hayes." He turned back toward the elevator, desperate to get back to his car to check on the babysitter watching Leora. But as he approached the glass doors of the private elevator, a heavy electronic clack echoed through the massive apartment. The elevator's call button turned from a soft blue to an angry solid red. Kevin pushed the button. Nothing happened. He pushed it again, harder. "It's disabled," Victoria said. Kevin turned around slowly. "I don't understand. The elevator isn't working." "The elevator is perfectly fine, Mr. Carter," Victoria said, taking a slow sip of her drink. "I locked it. You aren't leaving yet." A spike of adrenaline hit Kevin's chest. His fatherly instincts, honed by years of protecting a vulnerable child, flared into high alert. He was alone, 60 stories in the air, locked in a room with a billionaire who somehow knew his last name. "Unlock the doors, lady," Kevin said, his voice dropping an octave, the polite service worker facade vanishing instantly. "I delivered your food. I'm done here." Victoria didn't flinch. She set her glass down on a glass-side table and walked slowly toward him. "I didn't order the sushi because I was hungry, Kevin. I ordered it because I needed to get you in this room without raising the suspicions of my board of directors. And as for the tip, consider it a retainer." "A retainer for what?" Kevin demanded, his fists clenching at his sides. "Open the damn elevator before I call the police." "You won't call the police," Victoria said, stopping a mere 4 feet away from him, "because if you do, you won't hear the offer that is going to save your daughter's life." The breath completely left Kevin's lungs. The storm raging outside seemed to violently mute itself. "What did you say?" he whispered. Victoria Hayes gestured gracefully toward a sprawling leather sectional. "Please sit down. You're dripping on the imported rug, but I suppose we can overlook that, given the circumstances." Kevin didn't move. "How do you know about Leora?" "I know everything about you, Kevin David Carter," Victoria said, walking behind the kitchen counter. She pulled out a thick manila folder and tossed it onto the marble island. "Former senior architect at Whitmore and Vance. Fired 3 years ago after taking too much time off to care for your late wife, Sarah. Currently driving for 3 different apps. Drowning in debt. And a father to Leora, who requires twice-weekly immunosuppressant therapies that you are exactly $4,200 short on for this month." Kevin felt violated. A cold sweat broke out across the back of his neck, mixing with the rainwater. "Are you stalking me?" "What kind of sick game is this?" "It's not a game. It's a corporate acquisition," Victoria corrected coldly. "I needed a very specific asset, and my executive assistant Beatrice spent the last 3 weeks quietly scrubbing the backgrounds of thousands of local men to find you." "An asset?" Kevin repeated the absurdity of the situation, momentarily overriding his panic. "You think I'm an asset? I think you are a solution to a $5 billion problem," she replied. Victoria leaned against the counter, her grey eyes locking onto his. "My grandfather, Arthur Hayes, was an archaic, traditional man. He built Hayes Global on what he called family values. When he died, he left 51% of the company voting shares in a trust for me. But there was a stipulation." She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "The trust releases the shares to me only if I am married and can prove I am providing a stable family environment by my 35th birthday. If I fail the shares and total control of the company, default to my cousin Richard. Richard is a parasite who will sell the company for parts and put 5,000 people out of work just to buy another yacht. Kevin shook his head, trying to process the sheer scale of the madness. Your birthday is coming up. In 48 hours, Victoria confirmed. Richard has already called a board meeting for Friday morning to assume control. He thinks he's won. He knows I have no boyfriend, no fiancé, and certainly no intention of letting a man dictate my life. So you hired your assistant to dig through gig worker profiles to find what a desperate guy to play dress-up, a desperate, respectable guy, Victoria corrected. I couldn't hire an actor. Richard has private investigators watching my every move. If I hire an escort or a struggling actor, they'll uncover the paper trail in days. But you're a blue-collar tragedy with a white-collar background. You're educated, articulate, and cleanly divorced from high society. To the outside world, you're just a hard-working single father I happened to fall in love with. You want me to fake marry you, Kevin said, stating the word slowly to ensure he wasn't having a stroke. I want you to legally marry me, Victoria corrected. Tomorrow afternoon at City Hall. Then you and Leora will pack your things and move into this penthouse. You will live here for exactly 1 year. You will attend corporate galas, smile for the cameras, and play the doting husband. And you will bring your daughter, a billionaire stepping in to care for a sick child. The board will eat it up. It makes me look human. It makes me look like a mother. Kevin felt a surge of hot anger. My daughter isn't a prop for your PR campaign. Your daughter is dying, Kevin. Victoria snapped the ice in her voice, cracking just a fraction to reveal the ruthless pragmatism underneath. Let's strip away the sentimentality. You love her, but love doesn't pay for Dr. Gallagher's experimental treatments. Money does. And I have more of it than God. She reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet of heavy stock paper. She slid it across the marble island. Here is my offer. $2 million deposited cleanly into an offshore trust in your name the moment the marriage certificate is signed. Complete unlimited access to the best private pediatric specialists in North America for Leora. At the end of the 365-day term, we file for an amicable no-fault divorce due to irreconcilable differences. You walk away with another $3 million, and your daughter gets to grow up. Kevin stared at the piece of paper. $5 million. It was a number so large it didn't even feel real. It was freedom. It was safety. It was Leora laughing in a garden instead of crying under fluorescent hospital lights. But it required selling his soul to a woman who calculated human life in spreadsheets. Why me? Kevin asked, his voice rough. You could have found 100 guys in my situation. Because of your background check. Kevin, she said softly. 3 years ago, you had the option to put your wife in a state-run hospice. It would have saved you your house, your career, and your savings. But you bankrupted yourself to keep her comfortable at home until the very end. You are fiercely, dangerously loyal. If I buy your loyalty, I know you won't take Richard's inevitable bribe to betray me. Kevin closed his eyes. He thought of his damp, drafty apartment. He thought of the sound of Leora's ragged breathing at night. He thought of the eviction notice crumpled in his glove compartment. I have terms, Kevin said, opening his eyes. Victoria raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. I'm listening. We live together, but my private life is my own. You don't parent Leora. You don't discipline her. You act nice for the cameras, but behind closed doors you let her be a kid. And if you ever speak to me like I'm one of your employees in front of her, the deal is off, and I will burn your reputation to the ground myself." Victoria didn't look offended. In fact, a faint glimmer of respect flickered in her cold eyes. "Agreed. Are there any other conditions?" Before Kevin could answer, his phone began to ring. The shrill ring tone cut through the quiet of the penthouse. He pulled it from his pocket. The caller ID made his stomach plummet. "Chicago Medical Center, NICU/PEDS. "Answer it," Victoria said quietly. Kevin swiped the screen and brought the phone to his ear. "Hello." "Mr. Carter." It was a nurse, her voice tight with urgency. "It's about Leora. Her babysitter brought her into the emergency room 20 minutes ago. Her oxygen dropped dangerously low. Dr. Gallagher is stabilizing her, but—" The nurse hesitated. "They are running the credit card on file for the emergency admission, and it's being declined. I'm so sorry, Mr. Carter, but without an approval, we have to transfer her to the county hospital." County hospital. Overcrowded, understaffed, and without the specialized equipment Leora needed. It was a death sentence. Kevin looked up. Victoria was watching him, having heard every word in the silent room. Without breaking eye contact, she slid a sleek black titanium credit card across the marble counter. It stopped right at his fingertips. "Tell them to run that," Victoria whispered, "and tell them to prepare Leora for a private ambulance transfer to Northwestern Memorial. They are expecting her." Kevin's hand trembled as he picked up the black card. The metal was cold. "Mr. Carter, are you still there?" the nurse asked. "I'm here," Kevin said, his voice cracking. He looked at Victoria Hayes, his new boss, his new savior, and his new wife. "I have a new card for you to run." He read off the numbers. When the call ended, the heavy penthouse doors suddenly unlocked with a soft click. "The driver downstairs is waiting to take you to the hospital," Victoria said, turning her back to him to look out at the stormy city. "Have your bags packed by noon tomorrow. I'll send a car." Kevin walked toward the elevator. He paused at the doors. "Victoria." She glanced over her shoulder. "For what it's worth," Kevin said, the heavy weight of his new reality settling over his shoulders. "I hope your cousin Richard likes a fight, because you just hired a guy who has nothing left to lose." Victoria Hayes offered a sharp, dangerous smile. "That Mr. Carter is exactly what I'm counting on." Morning sunlight spilled across the imported Italian marble of the Waldorf Astoria penthouse, casting long shadows that felt entirely disconnected from the reality Kevin Carter had known just 48 hours ago. Yesterday afternoon, under the harsh, fluorescent lights of Cook County City Hall, he had signed a marriage certificate. Beatrice Victoria's hyper-efficient executive assistant had served as the sole witness, handing Kevin a pristine, tungsten wedding band that felt like a handcuff. True to her word, Victoria's money moved faster than lightning. Within 2 hours of the ink drying, a private transport team had moved Leora from the chaotic emergency room to the VIP pediatric wing at Northwestern Memorial. Dr. Aris Mitchell, one of the foremost autoimmune specialists in the Western Hemisphere, had taken over Leora's case personally. For the first time in 3 years, Kevin had slept through the night, the crushing weight of medical debt lifted from his chest. Now he stood in his new bedroom, a suite larger than his entire previous apartment, tying a silk Tom Ford tie that cost more than his car. Today was Friday, the day of the Hayes Global Emergency Board meeting. A sharp knock echoed through the suite before the door swung open. Victoria stepped in, wearing a striking crimson blazer that screamed aggression. She paused, her calculating grey eyes sweeping over him. "The suit fits well," she noted, her tone strictly business. "Beatrice has an eye for measurements. Are you ready, Mr. Carter? It's Kevin, he corrected gently, adjusting his cuffs. If we're going to convince a room full of corporate sharks that we are madly in love, you might want to stop addressing me like a junior analyst. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she gave a curt nod. Fair enough. Remember the narrative, Kevin. We met at a charity fundraiser 6 months ago. We kept it quiet because of my grandfather's declining health and your daughter's condition. We eloped because we realized life is too short to wait. Do not let Richard bait you. He is a master of psychological warfare. I've dealt with collections agents for 3 years, Victoria. I think I can handle a spoiled billionaire. 30 minutes later, they stepped out of a sleek black Maybach and into the towering glass and steel headquarters of Hayes Global. The boardroom on the 70th floor was a theater of intimidation. 12 men and women in bespoke suits sat around a massive mahogany table. At the head of the table lounged Richard Hayes. Richard was a slick, handsome man in his early 40s with a predatory smile and eyes that held zero empathy. When Victoria and Kevin walked in, his smile widened into a sneer. "Ah, the blushing bride," Richard drawled, standing up slowly. "And her gig worker groom." I must say, Victoria, when I heard the rumors, I thought it was a joke. A food delivery driver, really grandfather, must be spinning in his mausoleum. Whispers erupted around the table. Victoria didn't miss a beat. She walked to the head of the table, placed her hands flat on the polished wood, and commanded the room. "My husband," Victoria said the word rolling off her tongue with practiced ease, "is a licensed structural architect who put his career on hold to care for his dying wife and now his critically ill daughter. He understands loyalty sacrifice and hard work concepts you wouldn't comprehend, Richard, even if they came with a stock option." Richard chuckled, though his eyes remained dead. "A touching sob story for the press. But this board requires stability. Bringing a financially compromised outsider into the family trust is a liability. I motion for a temporary injunction on the transfer of voting shares until a full private investigation into this marriage is completed." Kevin stepped forward, placing a warm hand on Victoria's shoulder. He felt her rigid posture flinch slightly under his touch before relaxing. "Investigate all you want, Richard Heyer," Kevin said, his voice calm, carrying the quiet authority of a father who had weathered far worse storms than corporate posturing. "But while you're wasting company funds on private eyes, my wife is finalizing the acquisition of the River North commercial sector. A deal that will boost shareholder dividends by 14% this quarter. So ask yourselves." Kevin looked around the table, locking eyes with the skeptical board members. "Do you want a CEO who delivers 14% growth, or a cousin who wants to play gossip columnist?" The boardroom fell silent. A few older board members exchanged approving glances. Victoria looked up at Kevin, a flicker of genuine surprise cutting through her icy facade. Richard's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "This isn't over, Victoria," he hissed, slamming his folder shut. 6 months passed. The 365-day contract was at its halfway point, but the dynamics inside the penthouse had shifted drastically. Leora had been discharged from Northwestern Memorial after a miraculous response to the new gene therapy Victoria had funded. The penthouse, once a sterile museum, was now scattered with crayons, medical monitors, and brightly colored Lego blocks. The biggest surprise to Kevin wasn't the luxury. It was Victoria. The Ice Queen of the Gold Coast was melting drop by drop. It started small Victoria, pausing to answer Leora's endless questions about the Chicago skyscrapers visible from the windows. Then Kevin found Victoria sitting on the floor in her $2,000 skirt, helping Leora construct a wildly structurally unsound Lego castle. For Kevin, The act of pretending to be in love in public was becoming dangerously easy. He found himself admiring her ruthless brilliance, the way she protected her employees, and the rare, breathless laugh she only let out when she thought no one was watching. But the peace was a fragile illusion. Richard had not been idle. It all came to a head at the Hayes Global Annual Charity Gala, held beneath the towering dinosaur skeletons of the Field Museum. The elite of Chicago were in attendance, cameras flashing as Victoria and Kevin walked the red carpet. Kevin held her hand, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles, a gesture that wasn't in the contract. Midway through the evening, as a string quartet played softly, Richard cornered Kevin near the champagne tower. "Enjoying the high life, Carter?" Richard sneered, swirling a glass of scotch. "I have to admit you've played your part well. You've got the board eating out of your hand. But I finally found it." Kevin's grip on his own glass tightened. Found what? "The $2 million wire transfer," Richard whispered, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "Dated the exact day of your courthouse wedding. Placed into a shell account in the Cayman Islands. A direct payoff from Victoria to you. I have the bank records right here on my phone. In 5 minutes, I'm walking to the podium to make a toast, and I'm projecting these documents onto the main screen for the press, the board, and the entire city to see. You go to jail for fraud, and Victoria loses the company." Kevin felt the blood drain from his face. Richard had hacked the offshore trust. It was over. "What do you want, Richard?" Kevin demanded, his voice low. "Take this check." Richard pulled a folded piece of paper from his tuxedo jacket. "It's for $5 million. Walk out that door right now. Leave Victoria at the gala. Take your sick kid and disappear. If she is abandoned publicly tonight, the humiliation and breach of trust will force the board to strip her shares immediately. Do it or you both burn." Kevin stared at the check. It was more money than he could comprehend. He looked across the crowded room. Victoria was laughing at something the mayor had said, looking radiant in a sweeping emerald gown. She caught his eye across the room and offered a soft, genuine smile that made Kevin's heart hammer against his ribs. He wasn't acting anymore. He loved her. Kevin turned back to Richard. Without a word, he took the check, tore it precisely in half, and dropped it into Richard's scotch glass. "You're a fool," Richard hissed, turning toward the stage. "Watch your wife's empire fall." Richard marched to the podium, tapping the microphone. The room fell silent. Victoria frowned, stepping over to Kevin's side. "What is he doing?" she whispered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard announced, projecting his voice, "we are here tonight to celebrate honesty and philanthropy. But sadly, we have been deceived. My cousin Victoria has perpetrated a massive fraud upon this company and this city. Her marriage is a sham purchased for $2 million. And I have the bank records to prove it." Gasps echoed through the museum. Cameras instantly pivoted toward Victoria and Kevin. Victoria's face went chalk white. She looked at Kevin, terror breaking through her mask for the first time. Richard pressed a button on a remote, and a massive screen behind him illuminated, displaying a bank ledger. "Behold the payoff to Mr. Carter." The crowd murmured, squinting at the screen. But the murmurs didn't sound like outrage. They sounded like confusion. Richard turned around to look at the screen. His smug expression vanished, replaced by sheer panic. The document on the screen wasn't an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was a certified charter from the Chicago Medical Center Foundation. It showed a $2 million donation made anonymously on the day of their wedding to establish the Sarah Carter Memorial Fund for Pediatric Autoimmune Research. "What is this?" Richard stammered, frantically pressing the remote. "These aren't my files." Kevin stepped forward, taking the microphone from a sputtering Richard. "My cousin-in-law is a bit confused tonight," Kevin said smoothly, his voice echoing through the museum. He is referring to the $2 million my beautiful wife quietly donated to the hospital that saved my daughter's life on our wedding day. She didn't want publicity for it. But since Richard has forced the issue, I think we should give my wife a round of applause for her incredible generosity. The room erupted into deafening applause. The board members nodded in deep approval. Flashbulbs blinded them. Kevin turned to a hyperventilating Richard and leaned in close. Did you really think a former architect wouldn't know how to inspect a foundation? While you were digging into my bank accounts, I used my old contacts at the city zoning office to dig into yours. You embezzled $12 million from the River North project. I sent the real files to Beatrice an hour ago. She gave them to the FBI. They're waiting for you at the coat check. Richard's face crumpled in defeat. He backed away, turning and bolting toward the exit, only to be met by two men in dark suits. When the gala finally ended, Kevin and Victoria returned to the silent penthouse. The storm that had raged on the night they met was a distant memory. Tonight, the Chicago skyline was clear and glittering with stars. Victoria kicked off her heels and turned to him in the dim light of the foyer. Her hands were shaking slightly. "You didn't keep the money," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I checked the Cayman account yesterday to ensure you had a safety net. It was empty. You gave it all away." "I didn't want your money, Victoria," Kevin said, stepping closer to her. "I just wanted my daughter to live. And she is." Victoria looked up at him, tears shimmering in her steely eyes for the first time. She reached into her clutch purse, pulled out a folded piece of heavy stock paper, the original contract they had signed, and slowly tore it into pieces, letting them fall like snow onto the imported rug. "The 365 days are almost up," she whispered. "The board is secured. Richard is gone. You're free to go, Kevin. You earned it." Kevin reached out his fingers, gently tracing the line of her jaw. "What if I don't want to go? What if I want to renegotiate the terms?" Victoria let out a breathless, tearful laugh, leaning into his touch. "What are your new terms, Mr. Carter?" 50 years, Kevin murmured, leaning down until their lips were a breath apart. "No fake smiles, no escape clauses. Just you, me, and Leora." Victoria closed the distance, kissing him with a fierce, burning warmth that finally melted the Ice Queen forever. "Contract accepted." Did this story of unexpected love, corporate betrayal, and a father's ultimate sacrifice keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved watching Kevin outsmart the ruthless billionaire family to protect his daughter and win the heart of the Ice Queen, hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a satisfying plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more intense, real-life drama stories delivered every single week.